Okay, William, good to go.
Well, welcome, guys. You know, this is so exciting. We have Russell Mariani, digestive wellness expert. This guy knows a heck of a lot about digestive health. He's worked in that field for like 40 years, and he's an author. And Russell, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, William. And Jim, great to be here.
Absolutely honor having you here. Thank you.
You know, Russell, I know that you've discovered the redox breakthrough back in 2011. Explain to everybody, maybe give us a brief explanation, a little more information on yourself, and then tell us how you heard about this technology back in 2011.
Okay, great. You know, a little background about me. My interest in digestive wellness started out way back out of necessity. In 1973, at the ripe old age of 18, I was initially misdiagnosed with colon cancer. And after several weeks of additional tests and studies, I was told that I had something else, that I had a precancerous condition called ulcerative colitis, which is an inflammatory bowel condition, which is medically incurable. And I was told I'd have to be on medication every day for the rest of my life and probably lose my colon to surgery before I was 30 years old. So as you can imagine, at 18, this was not very good news. And but I had a very interesting question that day for my doctors. And that question was, this condition, does this have anything to do with my diet? And the doctors said, no, absolutely not. Has nothing to do with your diet. And now at that time, I didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't know anything about supplements. I didn't know anything about health. I was a pretty regular 18-year-old living in New Jersey. But I knew that their answer didn't make any sense. So I left the office, went to the library, the public library, and did some research. Came back a few weeks later with a stack of books all about the relationship between diet and health, and specifically diet and digestive health. Anyway, make a long story short, I made some dietary changes. I met some very interesting people back then, natural healers, people who knew about nutrition, and within a few months' time, all my symptoms were gone. So that really got my attention, and after I graduated university in 1977, I went back to school to study nutrition and health, and in 1980, I hung out my first shingle, and I've been in private practice ever since. So that's the short version of a very long story.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, that's actually... it's pretty interesting. Most 18-year-olds are not going to end up having that kind of challenge and have the motivation to go sit in the library and try and figure out what's going on. So, wow, well done. Well done.
Thank you. I was very motivated, yes.
And that guided your whole future.
I'm very thankful to that doctor because I left the office that day knowing two things. I am not going back because I don't like him. He didn't answer my questions, and he's not going to be able to help me. And so I was on my own. I knew I was on my own. And then I was very lucky that I met some very good people early in my journey. So, again.
Wow, that's really exciting. And so for about 30 years, since you hung your shingle out, you've been helping people, making a difference. Continuing with your education and helping people understand how they can get better. And then somehow you heard about redox.
Yeah, so actually this coming June 2020 will be the 40th anniversary of being in private practice. And my plan after, I'm working on it now, but my plan is to go full-time with ASEA. So I'm going to retire at some point, and I want to do ASEA full-time. So back in June 2011, I had been monitoring the health of a friend for several years. And this friend had been suffering from a condition that's caused by a tick bite. And he had been suffering for close to 10 years. And he had invested a small personal fortune traveling all around the world looking for solutions to this condition caused by a tick bite. And he was not doing very well. And I had seen him in January of 2011, and I knew how bad he was doing. But in June of 2011, he called me on the phone one day, and I'm listening to his voice, and I'm like, my God, Art, you sound great. You sound normal for like the first time in years. What's going on? What did you do? What did you discover? And that's when he told me about ASEA. And he was smart enough to put me on a three-way call within a day or two with Dr. Rob Ward. And I had a lot of questions for Dr. Rob Ward. And as you guys know, he's the redox doc. So he answered all those questions, and I was just absolutely fascinated with, I had never heard of redox molecules, and I considered myself an expert in cellular health, even back then. So I was absolutely fascinated, and it was either Dr. Ward or my sponsor sent me this book back in 2011, The Science of Healing Revealed by Dr. Gary Samuelson. It's not very long. It's about 80 pages. And I read that book, and as soon as I finished it, I read it again. I read that book 3 or 4 times that first week I got it. And I knew 2 things. I knew that if what Dr. Samuelson was explaining in that book was real, was true, then we had the most amazing breakthrough on our hands ever. And so I was very eager to try it, and I did, and I didn't really notice much in the first couple of months. But then I went to a fly-in that turned out to be the second convention back in August of 2011. And I heard Cindy Buck the other morning on a charge-up call saying that she went to a fly-in, and they had free ASEA all over the place. Well, they did back then, too, at the convention I was attending. And prior to the convention, I never drank more than 4 ounces of ASEA a day. But at the convention, I probably drank, 16 ounces a day, maybe even more than that. In those 3 or 4 days, I really started seeing and feeling a tremendous difference. And when I came home, I drank a little more ASEA than normal and started to have some pretty significant improvements in my own health.
Wow, that's really exciting. That's a great story. And so, can we touch for a minute more on your early thoughts? Your early thoughts as you read Dr. Samuelson's book and you started to realize that, this, if it's real, is really something. And then I see a book behind you there called Redox Life, which I certainly enjoyed reading. And it's filled with just a plethora of incredible information that much of it, I must admit, is way over my head. But the more I read it, the more I seem to understand. So your early thoughts, would you mind expanding a little bit? You mentioned something about this could be a pretty significant change for all of us.
Sure. Hey, just so you know, William, most of it's over my head too. But I keep reading. So, I think I was thinking about this before, not knowing exactly what you guys were going to ask me. But for me, with my background in nutrition, let me put it this way. To me, the most significant thing about redox molecules is, of course, we know that they're essential in helping cells detect damage, and then those same molecules send a signal to the nucleus, which then activates the genetic code to fix that problem. But if there is no detection of the problem, there can't be any repair. So that's probably the most important thing about redox molecules. They detect the problem, and then they activate the response. And they do that everywhere in the body, not just in the gut, not just in the brain, not just, everywhere, every organ, every system, every cell. But the other thing for me about redox molecules and nutrition, and this is interesting for any guests who are new to ASEA or are new to redox signaling molecules. You could literally be doing everything else in your diet and lifestyle correctly. Whole foods diet, probiotics, antioxidants, exercise, getting enough sleep, drinking pure water, getting massages, doing Tai Chi. You have this incredible diet and incredible lifestyle. But if your body is deficient in redox signaling molecules, you're only getting maybe 80% of the benefit from all those great things that you're doing. And here's why, very simply, because that's how my mind works. We see all these videos, and Alan Noble does a great job explaining, or saying that cells are a bag of salt water. So I think of our cells as water balloons. And if you've ever seen a water or a magician with a water balloon, and how they stick the sewing needle through the water balloon and they don't pop the water balloon? That's because the membrane of the balloon has tiny little microscopic holes in the latex, okay? And it's the same thing with our cells. Under normal circumstances, things don't get out of the balloon, the cell, and things don't get in the balloon, the cell. But in thousands of locations on the cell wall, and that's called the cell membrane, there are, and Gary Samuelson's book was the first time I read about this, and he does such a great job of explaining it. In thousands, so picture all the cells of your body, and those cells need oxygen and water and micronutrients. And those raw materials are supposed to be floating in your blood and lymph. On the cell wall, on the cell membrane, there are all these little openings. They're microscopic openings. But most of the time, they stay closed. But they're supposed to open when they see oxygen floating by. They're supposed to open when they see water floating by. They're supposed to open when they see micronutrients floating by. Well, guess what controls the opening and closing of every little opening on every cell membrane in our body? Redox signaling molecules. So not only are there gateways into the cell, there are gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers are redox signaling molecules. And what that means is, if you're deficient in redox signaling molecules, your gatekeepers are asleep. So you could be eating all this good food and have this disciplined lifestyle, but those raw materials aren't getting into the cell. Now, they're probably getting in at some level, 10%, 20%, 30%. But when people who are doing relatively good in their diet and lifestyle, supplements, etc., when they start drinking ASEA, and I believe I was one of those people, then all of a sudden everything, like I thought the lights in my body were all the way up, on the dimmer switch. But when I started drinking ASEA, it was like, oh my gosh, everything got better. I mean, my vision improved, my hearing improved, my sense of smell improved. It was quite amazing. So just one last point on that. So the synergistic relationship between our nutritional line, including Biome, all of those nutritional products work 10 times better if you're drinking ASEA. Because whether or not those nutrients get inside the cell, that's all due to the redox balance, the redox potential of our cells.
Incredible.
Hey, real quick, Russell, you mentioned that 10, 20, 30%. Does that vary with age? Does that percentage go up as we get older? And also then too, what's scary is that we've got a lot of young people like you, you're 18. I had a very similar experience when I was in college as well. But it seems like there's so many young people that we're seeing today that have gut issues. Do you see that rising? And again, does age affect how all that works? Thank you.
Yes, and it's a great question. And so, yes, I mean, just as we learn about redox molecules, we kind of peak out in our body's production of our own redox signaling molecules around age 18, 19, 20, early 20s. And then after that, it's a decline. For every 10 years we live, there's about a 10% decline. So by the time we're 90, unless we learn how to supplement with redox, our redox potential is very, very small. But the same thing is true with nutrition. So if we're not regenerating our cells, and we don't know how to do that, then our cells are degenerating. Now, another interesting experience I had back when I was 18 was that day I saw that doctor who gave me the bad news, I had an 8:30 appointment in the morning. And at 12:30 in the afternoon, the nurse came into the waiting room and said, why are you sitting here? I said, well, I had an 8:30 appointment. And she said, you? We thought you were somebody's grandson. We don't see patients in our office who are under the age of 50. I said, well, I had an appointment anyway. And so you're right, Jim. So this is a condition that as recently as 40 years ago, nobody had an inflammatory bowel condition under the age of 50. It was almost unheard of. So I don't know what percentage it was, but I was probably in a group of 5% or less. But unfortunately today, it's terrible. I have 3 clients right now who are teenagers. I talked to a father yesterday in Scottsdale, Arizona, whose 13-year-old daughter has one of these terrible inflammatory bowel conditions, and she's had it since she was 6 years old. So there are many ways that we can upset the balance of the microbiome. So this is probably a good transition point into gut health and what gut health is and what do we need to have our gut health in balance, and what are the influences that cause our gut health to go out of balance and develop these terrible conditions.
Fantastic. And let's start by talking about what would you say is the most misunderstood aspect of digestive health?
That's a great question. The most misunderstood aspect of digestive health would be this. So most people have heard what probiotics are, but they don't really know what the microbiome is. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But the most misunderstood thing about nutrition and gut health is the most important thing is not what you eat. The most important thing is how you eat, when you eat, where you eat, why you eat, and how much you eat. You could be eating the perfect meal, but if you eat too much of it, you can get gas, bloating, and cramping. You could have the perfect food in front of you, but if you don't chew it properly, you can have symptoms pretty quickly. You could have the perfect beverage in front of you, but if it's too cold when you drink it, you can get symptoms within 5 minutes. So that's something that I bring to the table. And in my book, I have a whole chapter called The Habits of Naturally Healthy People. So there are definitely complementary habits around what and how we eat, not just what we eat. The bigger issue, the big issue in gut health, digestive wellness today is a misunderstanding of the microbiome and how to service it. So if you imagine the microbiome as a garden, it's an ecosystem. And actually, I just reread the via nutritional PDFs in preparation for our meeting today. And each one of them does a great job of explaining this. And in the biome PDF, they talk about the gut as this tropical rainforest. And it's a very accurate analogy. So our microbiome is an ecosystem of many types of organisms. And there's, for example, with probiotics are healthy bacteria. And these bacteria, there's over 400 different strains of bacteria that have been discovered so far. And these bacteria perform many, many important roles in the digestive system in particular and in our overall health. So we're supposed to have, or let me take a step back. So we hear on a lot of ASEA calls and webinars this idea that the human body is made up of cells, and a lot of different numbers are thrown out, but most scientists tend to agree that the body is composed of about 100 trillion cells. Now that's what we see in all of our internal organs and liver cells, kidney cells, bone cells, blood cells, etc. But what rarely gets talked about is that this ecosystem of organisms that live in our body, in our digestive system, there's a number of individual bacterial cells that live in the gut 1,000 times 100 trillion. So if 100 trillion is a big number, and it is, 1,000 times 100 trillion, that's a really big number. And what that means, kind of numerically or mathematically, is what we normally think of as the human body is only 10% of what we really are if we define the body by the number of cells. And so this is why the microbiome has such a powerful influence on not just our digestive system health, but all other organs and systems of our body. Everything is downstream of the microbiome. So you're supposed to have 80% of all those trillions and trillions of organisms in your gut be probiotics. And if you had that happening, if you had 80% probiotics, your immune system would not only be normal, your immune system would be optimal. Nothing that came into your body that didn't belong there would go undetected, because your immune system would be 100% wide awake. Or let me take another step back. So the probiotics, the bacteria, are not just hanging out. Oop. We lost the visuals.
Oh, we're good here.
Okay. So these organisms are not just hanging out in your system. They're very active. In fact, they're voracious eaters. They eat your food, digest your food, and eliminate waste. And it's actually the waste products of the healthy bacteria that regulate pH, so no gas, no bloating, no cramping, produce all of your B vitamins. So everybody knows how important B vitamins are, but if you have really healthy gut bacteria, your gut bacteria produce all your B vitamins. The probiotics also produce enzymes to help break down your food, produce hormones to regulate the digestive system, and perhaps most importantly, the probiotics, the waste products from the probiotics, produce the most powerful antibiotics ever discovered. One of the most powerful antibiotics is something called acidophilin, which is produced from the acidophilus bacteria, one of the 16 strains of bacteria that are in our biome product. So the basic idea is if you have a very healthy microbiome, not only will you not be having any GI problems, you won't be having any digestive system problems, gas, bloating, cramping, constipation, or loose, urgent, frequent bowel movements, bad breath, bad skin. You will also not have a whole host of other problems, because everything is downstream of the microbiome. So now, what happens, and this may be the thing that's misunderstood most by people. So most people don't know about this 80-20 balance. And so what happens is the most common illness in America is something called IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And that means that you're having some type of uncomfortable GI event within a 90-day period. And the statistics on that are staggering. It's something like 75% of the people in America alone are having some type of negative GI event every 90 days, and many people more frequently. And all you have to do is watch TV at night, because every other commercial is about, heartburn, acid reflux, constipation, or one of these inflammatory bowel conditions. And that's all happening because the apple cart has gotten upset, and they no longer have 80% healthy bacteria dominating their system. They no longer have a garden within with beautiful flowers or beautiful vegetables blooming. They have a garden within that's been taken over by weeds. And again, those weeds aren't just hanging out, they produce toxins. So when you have the proper balance and proportion of probiotics in your system, that's called symbiosis. The symbiotic relationship and a synergistic relationship between and among all the healthy bacteria. And again, there's not just 2 or 3, and there's not just 16. There are over 400 individual probiotic strains that have been discovered. Now, the good news is, with a full spectrum probiotic like ours, you don't need to worry about the other, 384 or whatever it is. If you eat good food and the probiotics contain prebiotics, which ours do, you'll have a very healthy growth of probiotics. But when you have an imbalance of the wrong kind of organisms, you end up with a condition called dysbiosis, intestinal dysbiosis, where you could have 70-30, 60-40, 50-50 in terms of good versus bad bacteria in your gut, or you could have 60-40, 70-30, 80-20 in the opposite direction, or even 90-10, or in some cases, there's no good bacteria to be found anywhere in that person's system. Those people definitely have serious problems, and those people tend to be the ones that develop the inflammatory bowel conditions. So because the very opposite is happening. Remember when we talked about the probiotics, they eat your food, they digest your food, and they eliminate waste products. Well, the dysbiotics, the bad organisms, and it's not just bacteria. There's bad bacteria, and there's viruses, and there's yeast like Candida. There's mold and fungus and worms and parasites. There's all kinds of terrible things that can be there under this umbrella called dysbiosis. And all these organisms are eating your food, and they have voracious appetites, and they digest your food, and then they eliminate waste products into your gut area. And these waste products from the bad organisms are what cause the gas, the bloating, the cramping, the abdominal pain, the constipation. One of the waste products of these bad bacteria can literally numb the nerves that control the muscles, the peristaltic muscles of your intestines, small intestines and large intestines. So the basic idea is that these organisms produce waste products. When the probiotics produce waste products, that is helpful to our body. When the dysbiotics produce waste products, those are harmful to our body. And so under most circumstances, if people will get hydrated, which is something we teach in ASEA, and make the shift and eat, reduce processed food, reduce sugar. Sugar is the favorite food of the bad organisms. Eat more whole foods, and definitely get on ASEA and get on Biome and get on Source and get on all our nutritionals, then over time, and sometimes it can happen within 30 days, the balance between those bad organisms and the good organisms can dramatically improve. And over time, the good organisms will pull out all the weeds and leave you with a very healthy garden once again. Now, even in the healthiest garden, you can have a few weeds. That's not a problem. We just don't want the weeds taken over.
You know, this has been just golden nugget after golden nugget. You know, it raises a question, or actually it helps me realize what's happened for you in your life and also for your business and your clients' lives, is that in 2011, you discovered a company called ASEA, dedicated to cellular health. And at the time they had their flagship product, which was the ASEA Redox that we spoke of earlier. And since then, the company, in its effort to be a leader in cellular health, have developed these nutritionals that also include the Biome, which you've spent a lot of time helping us educate and understand a lot about. So isn't it interesting how this company and its focus on cellular health has greatly impacted what you do in your life as far as making a difference in people's lives?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have been one of the people the last 9 years, along with many others, saying, hey, to be the ultimate cellular health company, we need nutritionals, and we need these kind of nutritionals. And so, yes, I'm very happy, and so are lots of other people, because for the last 9 years, I've had to send people somewhere else to get their superfoods, to get their probiotics, to get their antioxidants, to get their omega essential fatty acids. And now they don't have to go, nobody has to go anywhere else other than ASEA for ultimate cellular health, full body health, whole body nutrition, nutrient rich, nutrient dense, antioxidant rich, enzyme rich. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. So yes, we're very lucky. This is a company that listens to its leaders, the leaders in the field. And we're blessed to have leaders in the field, and you guys are among them. As you know, when any of us have good ideas, ASEA listens.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, you mentioned antibiotics, the natural ones produced by the body.
Yeah.
And you know, I just have a question on antibiotics that the doctor might give us. Is it true there's a difference between what the body produces and what a doctor might give us, as far as would the antibiotics a doctor gives us typically cause an impact, maybe a negative impact to the biome?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, William. So two things. So just like our immune system is composed of about 30 different types of cells. One of those cells is called a natural killer cell. So there are actually surveillance cells. So there's a component of our immune system that's constantly swirling around, constantly circulating around our body, looking for problems. And when those cells detect a problem, like a tumor forming, very, very, very tiny tumor forming, they send a signal through redox signaling molecules, because all communication in the body is happening through redox signaling. They'll send a message to the immune system, and then the immune system sends out a natural killer cell or several natural killer cells. Well, the natural killer cell goes to the location where that little tumor is growing, and one natural killer cell can kill and completely dismantle over 100 cancer cells. Now this has nothing to do with ASEA. That's hard science. That's a science of the immune system. And oh, by the way, that's why the #1 pharmaceutical adventure right now is called immunotherapy. Scientists have known for 40, 50 years that if we could only harness the power of the immune system cells, we could defeat a lot of these illnesses and conditions. So it's very important to have a healthy immune system. But the point is, in the same way that the components of our healthy immune system know how to kill things that shouldn't be in our system and leave our other cells alone, it would, in other words, our immune system, when it's healthy, would never damage anything. So in the same way, the antibiotics that our body produces, that our probiotics produce, would never harm anything else in our gut. It's only those antibiotics are only going to go after things that don't belong in our gut. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, excellent.
Two other points on this subject. I have had many conversations over the years with Dr. Gary Samuelson and Dr. Rob Ward about this issue. And one of the questions I've always had is, do the redox signaling molecules in ASEA, do they know the difference between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria? And the answer has always been yes. And that is an amazing thing, because I have seen it happen over the before we developed our biome product. I've met many people in the ASEA community, and all they did was drink ASEA. And this was even before we had Renew 28. All they did was drink ASEA, and their gas and bloating went away. How is that possible? That would only be possible if the redox molecules were able to empower the health and strength of our probiotics, of our healthy bacteria. So that's mind-blowing, and that's true. So the redox signaling molecules are very smart. They know the difference between what they should be feeding and what they should be avoiding, or what they should be neglecting, or frankly, what they should be starving. You know, the best way to get rid of all the weeds is to starve them. Don't give them the food that they want. Don't give them sugar. Don't give them alcohol. Don't give them artificial coloring, flavoring, anything synthetic, etc. So now, before we go somewhere else, I want you guys to know this. I do a complete history on every single person that I work with. When people do my full program, my full gut health program. And over the years, the statistics are staggering when I try to pinpoint the time when their GI problems started. And it is something in the order of 75% of the time we can point back to the origin of this person's IBS or this person's IBD, inflammatory bowel problem, and it's antibiotics. And it's antibiotics taken not just for a gut health problem, although many doctors give antibiotics for those problems, but it's somebody had a sinus infection and they were given antibiotics for the sinus infection, and then within a week or two they had a GI problem. They had a loose bowel movement, or they ended up with constipation. They go back to their doctor and they say, I took this antibiotic and now my gut is all messed up. And the doctor says, oh, it's not connected. It is connected, because antibiotics kill bacteria, and they kill the good bacteria as well as they kill the bad bacteria in the gut. And so when people take antibiotics and they don't know how to protect their probiotic ecosystem, and then how to build up a healthy microbiome again after they've had the antibiotics, they're going to be in trouble. And this is a preventable problem. And this is why people need to learn that there's the difference between an allopathic medical doctor and an integrative medical doctor, or a functional medical doctor, because the integrative doctor is well versed and very, very knowledgeable about the microbiome. And if that doctor gives you antibiotics, they're also going to prescribe to you probiotics. In fact, in Europe, they've been doing this already for at least 10 years. No knowledgeable medical doctor in Europe is going to prescribe antibiotics without also prescribing probiotics. So we got a lot of catching up to do here in the good old US of A.
Well, fantastic. And even for those people where those types of problems have been identified, we now have the benefit of the redox and the biome, as well as the other nutritionals to really help their body overcome those impacts, right?
That's correct. Now, here's another important thing to say. So prebiotics are foods that have been determined to help the probiotics. And in our biome product, we do have prebiotics, and that's great. But I think a lot of people don't understand because, we may just not have had enough people talking about it in this way. But when you take source, all those micronutrients that are in source are prebiotics. They help our probiotics. All those fatty acids in omega are prebiotics. They help our probiotics. All those antioxidants, all those amazing superfoods and antioxidants from all those different plants and all those different mushrooms and all those different sources in the Life Max function in our gut as prebiotics. They help the probiotics. So it's a whole other reason for people to be taking all of the ASEA Via line of products, because not only do they help your whole body, nutritionally, they also help your gut.
A quick question: are there other ways then to get the probiotic into your body, or as we age, do we naturally need to supplement the probiotic?
Sorry, Jim. Are there other ways to supplement probiotics?
Well, how are the probiotics made in our body? Is it from the food? How else do we get? That may be a silly question.
No. I understand now. No, it's not a silly question at all. So bacteria are omnipresent. They're everywhere. So traditionally, for thousands of years, people got their probiotics because their food was not clean. Now, bear with me a minute to understand this. When I say clean, what I mean is their carrots still had little microscopic bits of dirt on them. And in that dirt were soil bacteria. And in the string beans they ate, there were little microscopic bits of bacteria. And all the root vegetables, and string beans aren't root vegetables, but all the root vegetables, onions, garlic, carrots, parsnip, everything that grows under the ground, all of those foods, and those were staple foods for humanity for thousands and thousands of years. All of those foods had remnants of dirt, of soil on them. And that's where people got their bacteria. That's where people got their probiotics, literally and directly from the soil. But since the time of the Industrial Revolution, we got into we got into this unfortunate place where we mistakenly started to believe that all bacteria were bad. And so we went out of our way to kill all bacteria. And so now we're making that correction, because I read this amazing statistic back in the early days when I was first studying probiotics. Some staggering number. I think it's 95% of all the bacteria in the world are healthy and health promoting and do no harm to human beings or animals. Only 5% of all the bacteria that have ever been discovered are in fact harmful. So think about that. That's kind of mind-blowing. So people traditionally got their probiotics from soil, little microscopic bits of soil, and actually visible bits of soil. People just, they knew intuitively that a little bit of dirt from healthy soil was not going to harm anybody. The other source of probiotics for thousands of years were naturally fermented foods. Pickles that were not pasteurized. So in Europe, we know about sauerkraut. You take cabbage and shred it and add a little water and salt, and a couple days later you have sauerkraut full of very healthy bacteria. And in the Orient, you know, they had miso and other naturally fermented foods. And in the Orient, they would ferment everything. And if you go into a Oriental market today, you'll discover kimchi. And kimchi is a fermented vegetable mostly, but you can pretty much ferment anything. So that traditionally is where most people got their probiotics. It's only probiotic supplements didn't even come into the world until like the late 1940s, early 1950s. It didn't really become popular. I mean, it's only becoming popular now in the last 5 or 10 years. I started taking probiotic supplements around 1990, but you know, that was an early adopter of that type of thing. But now probiotics are becoming mainstream.
Now, one other thing, William, and I know I'm sorry, not Doctor, but Russell, you've only got about 5 minutes. But I hear a lot about this leaky gut, leaky brain. Can you talk on that real quick? Because we've got multiple people that we're working with in a certain arena with young children.
Sure. So first of all, the gut is now being called the second brain because there is a direct connection through the vagus nerve. In fact, there are twice as many nerve cells in the gut as there are in the brain. So for many, many reasons, the gut is the second brain, but not second as in secondary. Many scientists now believe that the gut is superior. The brain in the gut, many scientists now believe that the brain in the gut is superior to the brain in the head, or the brain in the skull. And I can tell you, because I've been working with children with the autistic spectrum disorders, Asperger's, autism, that whole terrible spectrum of conditions, that many of the integrative and functional medical doctors believe that these conditions are caused by intestinal dysbiosis and leaky gut. So how does that happen? In a nutshell, how that happens is this. Remember I said all those bad organisms aren't just hanging out. They are voracious eaters of everything that you eat. And they produce waste products that are toxic to your system. So if you can imagine trillions and trillions and trillions of pathological organisms constantly producing waste products into your gut or into a child's gut, those toxins cause inflammation. And when the inflammation increases to a certain level, the literal wall of your colon expands. The literal wall of your small intestine expands. And that's called leaky gut. It expands, allowing what under normal conditions between every cell in the lining of your intestines are very, very tight junctions. There's space, but the mucus that exists between the cells prevents anything from going through. But if inflammation occurs, then those tight junctions get very wide, and that's called leaky gut. And that food and waste starts going out of the gut. All those toxins are supposed to stay in our intestines. But when you develop leaky gut, the toxins and food particles start going out into your bloodstream and causing all kinds of terrible problems. Not just cognitive problems, but that's one of the main sources of cognitive impairment. But it also causes skin problems, mood problems, energy problems, joint problems. Everything is downstream of the microbiome.
This is unreal. We got to have you back. I'm sorry, William. I'm overwhelmed with this.
Well, Russell,
you're amazing.
Russell, in respect for your time, we know you've got another appointment in just a couple of minutes. So we're gonna wrap this up. But thank you so much for your time. I love, the best part for me was it's not what you eat, it's how, when, why, etc. And boy, I'll tell you, I'm going to get that book of yours, Healing Digestive Illness, and learn more about that. But we'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, Russell, go ahead.
Show that again.
Go ahead and talk and put that title up real quick so we can see it. Go ahead and talk.
Healing Digestive Illness.
Okay, now
My website. The website is here.
There you
The
go.
website is healingdigestiveillness.com. So thank you guys very much. Really appreciate what you do for the ASEA community. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
This was
Russell.
fantastic. Thank you, Russell. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.